So the Salt statue, I'm really a social historian, if I can be called any sort of historian. My PhD was all about commercial sport and leisure in Bradford, which I was born and bred, well, born in Bradford and brought up in Shipley, actually. I used to walk through Saltaire on my way to school every single day. And the Salt statue is something that really caught my eye when I'd be wandering around Manningham Park. And I wondered why this wonderful statue, even at a quite young age, was stuck behind the Norman Arch. And it always stuck in the back of my mind. And when I was researching my PhD, mainly at the local studies in Bradford Central Library, I kept coming across references to these moving statues of Bradford. It seemed like one of these things that happens after midnight when the statues get up and walk around, but they have walked around a lot, so to speak. The Osler statue has moved on 3 occasions. The Salt statue has moved on 3 occasions. And it fascinated me. And every time I kept seeing the Salt thing, I'd scribble a couple of little bits of details down. And eventually it turned into this talk. So I'm not an architectural historian, far from it. So I've had to do an awful lot of research to work out some of the trends in architectural history, but it's been fascinating and I really, really enjoyed it. So I hope I can take on a little bit of a journey and try and illuminate a little bit more about the Salt statue. So what we're going to talk about is the Salt statue in its context, the man. I don't think I need to explain Titus Salt too much to this group. The statue itself, the family of monuments, and I think I'll be able to show to you that there are lots of these little types of monuments around the country. It's not unique at all. The inspirations which these monuments found, where they got their inspirations from, the movable feast, that is the history of the Salt statue, and it does move around quite a bit. And I've put the future because when I first gave this talk, it was to the Bradford Civic Society in the days when we used to be able to meet face to face. And they were having a debate about whether the statue should go back into the city centre, whether it should stay where it is, or whether it should go to Saltaire. And that was a great fun part of the debate, and you may wish to join in that one at the end. So Titus Salt, as I said, I don't think I need to really teach you people about Titus Salt. I'm going to tell Grandma how to suck eggs, but perhaps you would forget about his contribution to the city of Bradford as a whole. He was the mayor of Bradford. He was a chief constable. He was the president of the Chamber of Commerce, a founder of the Bradford Reform Association, funder of St George's Hall, and a major funder of Peel Park, the city's first ever park. And of course, his crowning glory, he went on to build Saltaire itself. But perhaps in the wake of the UNESCO Heritage Award to Saltaire, which has genuinely, I think, transformed the village. I remember walking through the village in the 1970s on my way to Nabu Grammar School, and there were parts of the village that had become quite run down, actually, hadn't they? And it's an astonishing turnaround, and I think it's a wonderful sight to see. But perhaps because there's such focus on Saltaire now, I think sometimes we forget that Titus Salt did have a massive impact on the city of Bradford as a whole, and perhaps the fact that the statue is now stuck around the back of the Norman Arch reflects that sort of almost forgotten heritage, if you like. So the Salt statue, it opened in the Town Hall Square on the 3rd of August 1874. There's a picture, a pretty bad picture, but a picture of it in situ. I guess you can work out exactly where it is from that picture. Why was it put up? Titus Salt actually wasn't very keen on the idea. He actually said to the people when they said, "Oh, we want to put a statue up to you," he asked them to permit me to die before doing that. But they thought that Salt was such an inspiration to the city of Bradford and the people that they really wanted to put that statue up. And I think elements like the Bradford Reform Society and the funding of Peel Park and the St George's Hall, you can probably see why they might want to stick a statue up to a man who is yet to die. And he did eventually go along. Titus Salt took a very much a back seat, but he did allow the sculptor to turn up and have 2 sittings, so the statue did actually look an awful lot like him. It was initially going to be a statue on a pedestal, i.e. with no cover. £1,600 had to be raised, and it was done by public subscription with a maximum £5 subscription. This was to allow people of all incomes to be able to contribute, and an awful lot of people did. They raised £1,683, which is almost exactly the amount required. But then Bradford Corporation decided that they would give this very prominent site right in the city centre, outside the town hall itself, And this completely changed everybody's mindset, because they realised then that with such a wonderful site that they had to really up their game. So they decided to add a canopy, and as you can see above the Salt's head himself, there is a canopy, and that cost £1,500, which essentially doubled the cost of the statue. But several prominent businessmen stepped forward to find the extra money. So the total was just about £3,000. And all sorts of things. When they launched when they sort of unveiled the statue, it wasn't just, there was a sort of minor public holiday went on, and people were selling things like this. This one appeared on eBay, this commemorative medal. I've not managed to get my hands on one. I'd like to do at some point. So it was more than just unveiling. There was a public holiday. The Duke of Devonshire rolled up on the 3rd of August 1874 and unveiled the monument. Now, the monument was supposed to have 2 alpacas on each side of it, flanking the memorial itself. I'm sorry, I called it memorial. It wasn't. It was a statue. The man was still alive. And here they are. It was decided that they didn't really fit in with the statue itself because of the new site. So they were given to the Bradford Tradesmen's Homes off Eaton Road in Manningham. And that's quite appropriate, because Titus Salt donated 2,000 guineas towards the building of the almshouses and laid the first foundation stone in 1867. And those 2 alpacas are still there to this day, and there's a photograph of them. So it's a lovely place. If you've never been up there, they're quite welcoming. You can wander in. It's tucked away, as I said, off Eaton Road. So where did this Salt statue appear from? It does look familiar, doesn't it? I guess you've all seen the Albert Memorial in London, which is the obvious thing. It comes from the Gothic era. This is where the Gothic era of architecture, which is the 12th to 14th century, an awful long time ago. If you think about the cathedrals of northern France in particular, they're the famous expositions of this style with their flying buttresses and rib vaults and all these interesting, strange words that architectural historians use. But that's the general theme of that. But we've got to go a little bit further back to begin to find the sort of roots of this statue. This is what they call a ciborium. It's a cover designed to focus your eye on the altar. So essentially what a ciborium does is it draws the eye into the centre. And if you think the venerational object on the Salt statue is Titus Salt, of course, the Albert Memorial in London, the venerational object is Prince Albert. But I think we can see quite a long way back that it's initially an indoor object. But there's the marble pillars. You can see the marble pillars at the side, the figurines that are just at the top there, the pinnacles that stick up on either side, and then the pediment and the spire or flesh, to use its French word. So the basic elements of the Salt statue are there right back in 1285. And there are lots of these things. This is the Shrine of the Madonna in Florence. And in this case, the devotional object, of course, is Madonna herself, and there she's stuck in the middle. But again, if you look at the design, it's very, very the pointed Gothic kind of design. It's very recognisable, isn't it, of what appears of from the Salt statue. And a bit closer home, I currently live in Filey, so I jumped on the train and went down to Beverley Minster to have a look at the Percy canopy. This is done in between 1340 and 49. It's for Eleanor Percy, the widow of Henry Percy. The Percy's currently seat is at Alnwick Castle, but they have massive landholds in East Yorkshire, so a big family. And there's figurines on there. You can see the figurines at the top and the pinnacles, the spiky monument of that era. But to go to an outdoor version, if you like, to scale this right up, we go to the Scaliger tombs of Verona, which were built in the 1300s. And this was beloved of John Ruskin. John Ruskin thought they were wonderful. And it's an outdoor setting, obviously. And they are kind of, although they're romantic, I'd say they are slightly sinister, but they are quite beautiful things, aren't they? They're quite odd things. But this took the whole thing outside. Now, if we talk about the top of the memorial, one of the obvious things is the Eleanor Crosses, quite famous Eleanor Crosses, built between 1291 and 94. They were built for to commemorate where the body of Eleanor of Castile, the wife of Edward I, laid. She died in November 1290 at Lincoln, and after 36 years of marriage, by the way. And everywhere they stopped with the body, they put up an Eleanor cross. It's not actually a new invention. There's a very similar thing in France, where there are crosses that marked the Louis XI's funeral procession right across France as well. So there are 12 Eleanor crosses, by the way. This is a very good version at Geddington Cross in Northamptonshire. This is a very excellent one, actually, at Waltham Cross in Hertfordshire. So there are, as you can see, they're going to form the top of the SALT statue as we move along. So we talked about the Gothic very briefly, about Gothic architecture. There was a Gothic revival. Everything gets revived at some point, doesn't it? Between 1750 and 1850, 100 years of it, and it becomes kind of the house style of Victorian Britain. And the pinnacle of that, of course, is the Houses of Parliament. This is before the days of scaffolding on the Elizabeth Tower. Epitomised by that, Pugin, Charles Barry, and the Gothic revival has been called a peculiarly British style. It was very British, and you can see that around the empire as well. If you go to places like Australia and Canada, you'll see very similar architectural styles. And it kind of, because it was said to fit the ideals of British liberty, of justice, that everybody thought had been born during the Middle Ages. And part of this was a reaction to urbanism and industrialisation, that people were looking back to a supposedly more romantic and freer past. It's always us, isn't it? We probably look at the Victorian age now and think that, oh, well, mustn't it have been wonderful? And yet, urbanism spread the Gothic. With thousands and thousands of churches, town halls, libraries, courts, universities, hospitals, railway stations, you name it. It does become the house style. So it's no surprise that the SALT statue itself is actually in that style. But some people have said that the first time that this is put into a context is actually in an opera set, which sounds bizarre because surely it should be a built thing, but it isn't. Carl Friedrich Schinkel is a Berlin architect, and he did a stage check for the opera in 1860 of Undine. And there's an actual better photograph of that, but I couldn't scan it from a book. And it's like this dreamy Gothic townscape. But if I'd have shown that without the explanation, you might have thought to yourself, "Oh, I wonder where that could be. Glasgow, is it perhaps, or Manchester?" Because it does immediately look familiar, doesn't it? In this one, of course, there's no statue. It's an empty, bereft of the statue. But the figurines are on there. The pinnacles are on there. The spires on there. There are even flying buttresses off the side, very miniature ones at the bottom. So it reflects back to the Gothic cathedrals of France. And Schinkel also did a Kreuzberg monument in Berlin in 1826, which is essentially an Eleanor cross, isn't it? But it's an iron Eleanor cross. Freedom Monument, by the way, this was about Prussian freedom, not German freedom. The country of Germany didn't exist, of course, in 1826. And again, all the elements are there, aren't they? You can see the figurines dotted about the warriors there, the pediments, which, you know, above the warriors, the pinnacles, the spiky pinnacles, and the spiral flesh that surmounts the whole thing. And British architects were watching what Schinkel was up to. George Gilbert Scott, the famous George Gilbert Scott, created the Martyrs Memorial at Oxford in 1843. Scott visited every single Eleanor cross before he developed this design, and spent an awful lot of time studying the Eleanor crosses. So hence, hey, no surprise, it looks like an Eleanor cross, doesn't it? By the way, the Oxford martyrs were Hugh Latimer, Nicholas Ridley, and Thomas Cranmer, the three bishops burned for heresy in 1555-56 by the Catholic Queen Mary, Bloody Mary, of course. All this was reversed when her half-sister Elizabeth took the throne. And probably the most famous of the first of this family of monuments, and I think this is where I can start talking about a family of monuments that lead towards our statue, if you will. The most famous one is a Walter Scott monument in Edinburgh in 1846, and it's a terrible angle is this photograph, unfortunately. But you can just see Walter Scott sat there. He's hidden by I think that's the North British Hotel clock tower in the background, on the gardens above Waverley Station, across in Edinburgh. We all know Walter Scott with his Ivanhoe, Waverley, Rob Roy, Kenilworth, those famous novels. He kind of romanticised Scotland and the border areas in that time. And he was also looking back, along with people like Walpole and William Beckford, towards the romanticisation of the Middle Ages. So again, that taps into the same thing about the Gothic and everybody dreaming about this supposedly lost golden age, which I said is this kind of a reflection on worries about urbanism. And we probably worry today, don't we, about housing estates being built on the edge of the town. And it's a similar thing that the Victorians were worried about the way we were building this new urban society. Was it a success? Well, I think it was, but John Ruskin didn't think so. He called it a vulgar Gothic steeple. quite a description. But it was a success because people started copying it, and you know that's the way we go. This is Thomas Jabez Hines Gothic, George Bentnick Memorial in Mansfield. They ran out of money, by the way. That's why there should have been a statue to Bentnick in the middle. He was an anti-Corn Law MP, so he wouldn't have been popular in Bradford, but he was definitely popular. Mansfield then was probably not as industrialised as it was now, so a bit more pastoral. So the anti-Corn Law thing wasn't as virulent as it was in Bradford. Sleaford has got a Henry Hanley Memorial, and another anti-Corn Law MP. There is actually a statue to him in the middle of all that one, but it's hidden because of the camera angle. I've not had the chance to go to Sleaford and take a picture, so I had to nick this one off the internet, unfortunately. But it's an excellent one, isn't it? It's got you can see the flying buttresses, you can see the pinnacles of the flesh, and all the usual details, and the little figurines up in the top there. So it's quite a nice one. And close at home, a lot closer at home actually. Eli Milnes, who one of the architects who did the house style of Little Germany in Bradford, of course. He designed the Albert Memorial at Queensbury, which appeared in 1863. Probably not the best place monument nowadays. It's traffic blasted when you go up to visit. But I'll tell you what, it must be the most elaborate drinking fountain of all time, mustn't it? Because that's essentially what it is. But they're the figurines. You can see the pediments, crocheted pinnacles. They're the spiky things, by the way. Columns. So yeah, that's an awful lot closer to home. But probably the one where I think the Salt statue took its real inspiration from is the Albert Memorial at Manchester in 1865. And why would Manchester? I suppose you might say, well, why did Manchester stick up a memorial to Prince Albert before London? Well, the reason is because of the success of the Great Exhibition in London in 1851. Manchester decided that they wanted one. And Prince Albert was asked about what he thought about the idea, and he put them off it. He said, no, we've done this fabulous exhibition. You won't beat that. Anything you try after that will be just a damp squib. So they did instead the Art Treasures exhibition in 1857, the largest art exhibition of all time, by the way, 1.2 million visitors. And so when Prince Albert died, Manchester wanted to show their gratitude towards Prince Albert. So they built this memorial in 1865, and it's built like Manchester Town Hall of Garesby Stone, and Garesby Stone is of course from Bolton Woods, and so it's the best stone they could find apparently for the climate and also all the pollution that industrial Manchester was spewing out at that time. But probably the daddy of them all, and the most grand memorial, is George Gilbert Scott's Albert Memorial in London in 1872. I managed to take this picture before all our terrible lockdowns. It's absolutely, I've been there before, but I think to spend some time staring at it, since it's a very expensive restoration, it is absolutely astonishing. It really is. It's almost jewel-like, isn't it, compared to the other ones? It's just stunning, beautiful. Queen Victoria wasn't a fan. She thought it looks too much like a market cross. I'm not quite sure what market she attends, but I've never seen a market cross on that scale. But she did also say, and it looks too much like Walter Scott's Memorial at Edinburgh, which I think was a fair comment, to be honest. And all this was said to be at the forefront of Lockwood and Mawson's mind. Lockwood and Mawson, I've jumped on there, sorry. Lockwood and Mawson were the architects who obviously essentially built central Bradford, didn't they? And Lockwood and Mawson were given the job of creating a salt statue. And apparently the Albert Memorial and the one in Manchester were very much at the forefront of their minds. And in some respects, that's a great thing, because Titus Salt subscribed to the Albert Hall, and he had his own private box there that I think he paid £1,000 for, which I've not done I've not what I should have done actually, and I was going to do it this morning, but I forgot all about it. Was to tell you how much £1,000 is worth in today's money, but it will, trust me, it'll be an awful lot of money. So the STAUTE statue appears in Bradford in 1874 by Lockwood and Mawson. And almost immediately, someone said it had a suspicious resemblance to the Albert Memorial, but as we've seen, well, that's fairly obvious. The sculpture was John Adams Acton. This is a sculpture of the actual statue itself in the middle. He travelled to Carrara in Italy, where he selected a 14-ton block of white marble. And when it arrived at the docks in London, he had 16 horses brought to drag it from the dockside to his studio. I've yet to find out how it got from his studio to Bradford, and how many horses or trains or whatever must have been involved, but that's a story I would like to find at some point in the future. Salt is shown holding a plan of Saltaire in his left hand. And if we go back to the Albert Memorial, Prince Albert is holding the Great Exhibition catalogue in his hand. So there's obvious straight away where we've got these parallels. The pillars on the side are from Shap in Cumbria, Shap marble pillars, and the main body of stone came from the Cliffwood quarry up above Bolton Woods, the same quarry used, by the way, for the construction of the town hall in Bradford. Now, around the edges, we have some interesting details. The heraldry in the pediments, there's a coat of arms, you can probably see one there. It's the coat of arms of the Salt himself, and also of the city of Bradford. And they're all around on all four sides. There are also the virtues. There are 4 virtues. The figurines, that is, you can see 2 of them there. There's justice, prudence, temperance, and charity. That's either 3 of the 4 cardinal virtues or 4 of the 7 heavenly virtues. You can take your choice. It's the same sculptures, by the way. These were done by the same people that did the kings and queens around Bradford Town Hall. So you can see the linkages all the time back to the construction of the town hall. And there's a close-up of Justice, Blind Justice, of course, which is a fabulous one. So where did it go? Here we are. And that's a lovely picture of the monument in Town Hall Square in 1874. And it's before, this is a very early photograph because there are no tram tracks at all. And the trams will become a real problem to the memorial, the statue. I keep calling it a memorial. It does become a memorial. It's a statue at the moment, in this moment in time. But I think you can see from that photograph that the architectural relationship between the Salt statue and the town hall, it really was built with and designed with its setting in mind and with the town hall in mind. And as I said earlier, as soon as the corporation said they could have this fantastic site, that's when the people who were funding the statue decided they had to really up their game and make this into some sort of high art rather than just a bare statue. So I think that's all worth bearing in mind. In 1891, the Bradford and Shelf tramway opens. Many of the aldermen, by the way, and some of the councillors on Bradford Corporation were directors of the tramway, which causes problems in the future. The corporation, a bit like the railways today, were not allowed actually to run the tramways by law. They could in the future that changed, but at that time the corporations were not allowed to run. They could facilitate them and they could pay for the tracks being laid, but they were not allowed to run the actual trams themselves. It's a bit like the division of track and train on the modern railways. There was talk of moving the statue because the problem was the trams would, if you consider tram tracks that go around the monument just above where it says Town Hall, and apparently these were steam trams as well. So you'd have a sort of mini-sized steam engine dragging a tram car, and they would pull up next to the monument and sit there in between their jobs. And this spewed all sorts of pollution all over the statue. And also, half the time, you couldn't see the statue because there was a tram car parked outside it. And some letters appear in the Bradford Daily Telegraph complaining about this. I think they were planted letters, to be honest, given what happens. And 1 or 2 people said that they should be moved to in front of the Unitarian Chapel. Now, if you look just in the bottom left-hand corner, you can just about see the Unitarian Chapel. And the statue was proposed to be moved across to where perhaps older viewers will remember the Crystal Palace toilets. Today, we would be probably somewhere in front of the Magistrates' Court on the edge of the City Park. So that was the first idea to move it, but that was rejected because some of the directors who just happened to be aldermen and councillors on the Bradford Corporation, objected to that as well, because they thought it might get in the way of the future tram, the Manchester Road tram extension, which was coming. Another idea was to move the statue to Foster Square, but that was rejected. And then there was yet another suggestion that the Shelf tramway should be either shortened and put down Chapel Lane, which is at the back of the town hall, but then the town hall was built across that in later years, or it should be extended down to Foster Square station itself. That was a preferred element of the tramway itself, but of course they wanted Bradford Corporation to pay for all these things. So you can imagine what happened. The whole thing was kicked into the long grass for many, many years. But by 1896, it was decided that enough was enough, that the statue had to be moved, and it was going to be moved to Lister Park. And the reason why it was moved to Lister Park, and the reasons given were obviously the tramways, but the decision was made that if it was moved to the park, then it wouldn't have to be moved again, and it wouldn't suffer the pollution, it wouldn't suffer being moved for some unimaginable developments. They always thought that the park would always be there, the green lung of the city would always be there, so the statue would be absolutely safe in its new location. On the 25th of July 1896, the statue was re-erected and opened near the Victor Road entrance. Now, you'll be thinking to yourself, that's not where it is now, is it? And you'll be right to think that, because around in 1904 comes the Bradford exhibition. And by the way, when Chris Gaffney appears on your talk, Chris is obsessed with hunting for the remains of the 1904 exhibition, and I'm trying to get him to go and hunt to see if we can find the plinth of the original salt statue site within Manningham Park, but we'll have to see about that. So in 1904, the Bradford exhibition appears on the scene. The massive planning went into this. It was a huge operation. Originally, there was going to be an elaborate classical bandstand and the statue and Cartwright Hall all lined up together in symmetry. But at the last minute, the money was overrun. There was a massive overspend on the exhibition, so it was decided to completely re-elaborate the what became Cartwright Hall, change its axis. Sorry, that's the word I was looking for. They changed the axis of Cartwright Hall completely, and guess what? This salt statue was just pushed into the sidelines. Then they were worried that as Victor Road was going to be one of the main entrances for the millions of people they hoped would visit the Bradford exhibition, that the statue would then fall in its current location, would cause an awful lot of congestion. So after much argument, they decided to move it again in the park. And this is when, by the way, this is another view of it in its original location. So they decided to move it again to get it away from the congestion, and it disappears off down to its current location in 1904, just in time for the opening of the park. It's put behind the Norman Arch. Of course, the Norman Arch isn't Norman at all. It was built in 1883. Supposed to be a 14th century Abbey gateway. That's what it's based on. So it's neither Norman nor 14th century, but I quite like I think it's a wonderful piece of architecture. But the salt statue is now sat behind it. A statue that's designed to be seen from all sides is now stuck behind it. For better or for worse, that is where it has remained to this day. And as you can see, that's a view from behind, and you've got the embankment that leads up towards the lake, so it's difficult to walk around. So to conclude, I'll probably race through this quite quickly, haven't I? The statue became almost accidentally a piece of high Gothic art. It should have been a fairly unornamented statue. It should have been that until the corporation decided to give the statue this wonderful site right outside the town hall. So that meant that therefore they would spend more money and make it into a Gothic piece of art with a canopy and everything else that we've described earlier. When it was removed to the park, and I'm talking about its original location by Victor Road, that might be seen as a pragmatic response to a growing city, or is it a damning indictment of a town that cared more about its tramways operations than it did celebrating a leading citizen, or even keeping the city centre very beautiful? And even then in 1904, when the Bradford exhibition appears, surely any exhibition that is celebrating the rise from Market Town to Worstedopolis would have wanted to put front and centre one of its major industrialists. So why wasn't Titus Salt left in situ or for the crowds to see? Because in its location where it was left, it was outside the actual exhibition itself. And that has led to a lot of speculation that there might have been a political motive behind the move. And there was a shift from Liberal to Tory around that sort of era on Bradford Council. But I've not seen anything written down to suggest that whatsoever. And I think the first time I see any references to a political motive is something like 50 or 70 years afterwards. But interestingly, when the Osler statue is moved, and that used to be outside Foster Square Station, and that was moved because of the kink in the tramways, allegedly. It was moved up to, initially up by Rawson Place, wasn't it? And now it's on Rawson Square. But when it was first moved, the Bradford papers were all talking about, oh, well, it's in the way of the tramways, it needs to move. But one of the Leeds newspapers said that not before time, the Osler statue essentially was an embarrassment to Bradford because it drew attention to child labour in the mills. So perhaps, who knows, that the SALT statue was moved for other reasons than congestion, A, with trams, and then B, potentially with visitors to the Bradford exhibition. So what now? Is there a future? And this is, I remember pre-pandemic, talking to the Bradford Civic Society about the exact same subject. And we had been tipped off, and I got tipped off at the time that Bradford Council were actively looking at moving the statue again. But that's, I can tell you all about it now because it's all collapsed. The idea was that Bradford Interchange was going to be massively upgraded to for Northern Powerhouse Rail, and that the statue might be used as a part of the gateway to that, so the pedestrian approach outside round the back, well, basically where the Queen's pub is now, that was all going to be flattened, and this statue may well have ended up there. However, Northern Powerhouse Rail now, to cut costs from tunnelling under Bradford, the station is supposed to be going to be up at St James's Market, the old Adolpha Street station, but even that, the entire Northern Powerhouse Rail project's in jeopardy now. So I think, frankly, the statue's staying exactly where it is for the time being. And there have been voices that said that the statue should be moved to Saltaire itself. Chris Leslie, when he was elected MP in 1997, talked about moving the statue to, I think, where the laundries used to be, or some such. But then it was pointed out to somebody that, well, hang on a minute, there's already a statue of Titus and Saltaire, thanks very much, in Roberts Park. So that all went very quiet. And when the expense of moving the statue came to light, it was quietly dropped. So who knows whether the last chapter of the SALT statue has been written? I've no idea whatsoever. I think it'll be still there when I finish my days on this planet, and it probably won't move. So that's the story of the SALT statue. So thanks very much, and I'll pass you back to Les once I can stop sharing this screen. There we go. Thank you. I think you're on silent, Les. You've muted yourself, Les.
Okay, thank you. Thanks very much. Okay, can I start off the Q&A by asking a question myself? Is that allowed? Can the chair do that? I think I'll take the chair. Can you just remind me who the sculptor was for the statue, David?
Oh, let me find my notes. I'm not that clever to remember it. John Acton, 1 second. Here we go. So John Adams Acton. So I was quite close, wasn't it? Not too far away.
Acton, as in
Acton,
A-C-T-O-N, yes?
Correct, yeah, so it's a hyphenated last name, Adams Acton.
Okay. And one other thing I'd just like to contribute. You were talking about how much X thousands of pounds was in modern money.
Yes.
The benchmark I use is the Saltaire Church, now the United Reformed Church. That cost £16,000 to build. So if people remember that, I don't remember much these days. So if I can remember, I think many other people can. It actually allows you to gauge what is, what constitutes £6,000, £20,000 in Victorian times.
Yeah, I do another talk, Les, about the lunch stops of Anglo-Scottish Expresses, bizarrely. And they used to stop at Normanton in West Yorkshire. Well, one of the routes did the Thames-Clyde Express route through St Pancras that came through Shipley and Saltaire. They used to stop at Normanton for lunch, and there was a carpet laid in the first-class dining room. It was £400. and in today's money, that's I think it's £32,000 nowadays. As part of the talk, when I first started doing that talk many years ago, so it was part of my MA at Leeds University, I used to say, what can you get in Normanton today for? £26,000, we'll say. And I used to be able to show a picture of a house. But unfortunately, unfortunately, if you live in Normanton, the house prices have gone up so dramatically, I can't even do that anymore. But it is a blunt object. I think inflation is a very blunt object because things change they move in different values. But yeah, I think you can get an idea of the kind of the value of money, but it's not easy because stone for a monument would cost different to the price of bread or commodity, coal or whatever.
No, you're right. And just my final contribution, and then I'll ask other people to jump in. £16,000 was the amount of money spent on the church. About 10 years or more ago, the church was done up, the exterior of the church was done up, and the gold finial on the top was replaced at a cost of £16,000. So that's rather interesting. Okay, who's gonna jump in next? Give us a wave, please, and have your question or your comment. Oh, silence! Come on.
I must have covered everything, lads.
Julie, hello, Julie. By the way, nice to see you. I can't hear you. You're on mute, Julie. You're on mute, Julie. Now that's more like it.
I just wondered if the sculptor John Adam Acton. Anyway, was he a renowned sculptor at the time? Was he sort of, quite a established sculptor?
That's a good question. I don't know the answer to that. I need to find that out. I presume it's a job. I don't know. It could be a job in sculpture. He was down in London, so I don't know the answer to that. We need to find that one out. I'll make a little note and remind that for the next time. Thank you.
And just while I'm still on, I just wondered if it did ever move back to Saltaire, and I know there's one in the park, but is there a place in Saltaire for it? Where would it go? Where could it possibly go?
Yeah, right. Good point. Anybody got any answers to that, or anybody got a different question, comment?
There was a bit of a bun fight at the Bradford Civic Society talk where we had some people from Friends of Lister Park who unsurprisingly thought that they would like it to stay in Lister Park, thanks very much, and pointed out that it'd been there for the majority of its life. One or two other people, I think my personal view is I think it was designed for the city centre, and I think if it had to move, I think that's would be my preference. Yeah. Saltaire, there was somebody mentioned near the allotments, but I think one of the allotment holders might have another view on that.
One thing is certain, I think, it's that its position in Lister Park is just diabolical. I mean, it's just dreadful against that Norman arch. And whatever is done with it probably can't be quite as bad as it is now, I think.
Agreed.
Yeah. Comments, please. Who's coming in? Oh, we're getting all quiet. Is that Sue?
Yeah, I was in the park today actually looking at it. I'm from Friesing Hall and I've got happy memories of climbing all over it. And we called him Grandad. And some of the lads got right to the top, the pinnacle. I only managed his knee. But it doesn't look positionally as bad as it used to, because a lot of the trees and shrubbery around it has been cut down, so you can sort of see it properly and walk all around it, But what I was going to ask is, Manchester and Liverpool and obviously the Albert Memorial, and all of a sudden all the major cities wanted some sort of monument like that. Was it a fact that Bradford thought, well, they're all having one, we should have one, we were going to put in it, or was it the other way around? We want a statue of Salt, and well, we'll have it like that because that's the fashion.
Yes, I think you've eventually answered your own question. Actually, yeah, I don't think it was Bradford thinking, "Oh, we must have a statue of somebody. Let's pick somebody randomly." I think there was when you read the newspapers at the time, there was a genuine desire to put the statue of Salt up, and the fact that he was still alive he himself was a bit embarrassed by the whole thing. But there was clearly a very strong push, and the public subscription was strong. So yeah, I think I don't think it was Bradford thinking we need a statue or something or other. And then once they decided to do the statue, I think that the actual design of the monument sort of fell into place, because that was the trend of the time. And just going on to Lockwood and Mawson, I think they did Saltaire as well, didn't they? I think Lockwood and Mawson did Saltaire. Yeah. Their journey is an interesting one. If you look at 3 of their major buildings in Bradford city centre, it's almost an architectural journey through Victorian architectural styles, because they start with St George's Hall, which is classical inspired. Then they move on to the Wool Exchange, which, of course, they involved John Ruskin in that bun fight, didn't they? He made some interesting comments that people have only cherry-picked. It sounds like he's quite insulting to Bradford, but he isn't. He's basically saying it's your decision and you should do it. Which is sort of Venetian Gothic, I guess. I have no idea. And then they go on to the Town Hall, which is a bit more, well, there's elements of Florence bell towers in there and all sorts, but it is a tremendous building and probably one of the greatest civic buildings in Britain. So their journey is interesting, and kind of if the Titus Salt monument had happened, I don't know, 30, 40, 50 years earlier, what would they have looked at? Well, the examples at that time were all very classical, things like Nelson's Column in London, because that had been built in the early 1800s. So architectural styles had changed, and Victorian Britain was looking for its own style. And very much like today, things don't stand still at all. In fact, probably things change quicker then than they do now. So yes, it's just a moment in time, I think, and I don't think that Bradford was looking for a monument. Sorry, it wasn't a monument as such. But yeah, there was a genuine desire to put Titus Salt on a statue, whether he liked it or not.
Right. Thank you.
Next, please. Oh, they're very quiet tonight.
Well, I'll have another go.
Oh, great. Well done, Sue. I don't think we've heard from you before.
Well, I'm too, you know. The one thing I'm curious about is he was sort of a very sort of reticent person, and obviously, you know, he did say, "Well, wait till I'm dead," you know, and then I'd rather you waited till I was dead. Did he actually attend the inauguration?
No, he didn't. He stayed at. I think he stayed at Morley, well out of the way. No, he didn't. Not at all. Which is, I don't think any of the family turned up actually. But I think it's difficult to read. You can't see into the man's mind, can you? Yeah, the Duke of Devonshire was the man who unveiled the statue itself and spoke well of. In fact, I've just found the quote. What he says. Yeah, they said it was important. Again, I wrote this down because they're talking about the location. It was important the statue was seen on a daily basis by the most busy and enterprising of their manufacturers, i.e. Bradford, and they would remember the example to be learned from Sir Titus Salt. So that was said on the day of the unveiling. And then when he died, of course, on the 29th of December 1876, when he was buried at Saltaire, the funeral procession went right past the monument itself, which was now a memorial, I suppose, and it was draped in black, and the coffin stopped opposite for a very short time and set off again. And apparently it took half an hour for the entire funeral procession to pass by the memorial, what was now the memorial.
Next, please. Oh, you can do better than this. Come on, Saltaire. Speak to me.
Well, shall I have another 2, Penrith?
Go on.
What would we do without you, Sue?
As I said, I was in the park today with a friend, and we were doing the circuits and what have you. And it just struck me that we were talking about the history of Bradford and Worcesteropolis and all this. And at one end of the park, you've got Lister. And then at the other end of the park, you've got Salt. And it seems sort of appropriate that we've got those two, because I think there was a bit of rivalry, wasn't there? And they were two completely different characters, you know, as people. And it just seemed appropriate to me that we've got the two monumental industrialists of Bradford. Then we went in Cartwright Hall, and there's the statue of Cartwright, who sort of preceded both of preceded both of them. And so I'm sort of thinking he's best left where he is.
Yeah, I think it's a fair point. Perhaps relocated within the park. I don't know, you can make that argument. There has been money knocking about. Whether there's any money left in the coffers after COVID, I have no idea. But an awful lot of money was spent on restoring the Albert Memorial in London. That got in a terrible condition. Including painting the golden statue black so Zeppelins couldn't spot it in the First World War, interestingly. But there's always money for things, aren't there? You can always find it could be found. I think that's a really interesting point about the two big industrialists being in the same park. Very different people, as you mentioned, Stu. I mean, I think politically they're from opposite end of the spectrum. And of course, nothing was given away, was it? Manningham Park was sold to the corporation at a lower rate just before he cleared off to become, was it Lord Masham? But J.B. Priestley always said about the Anglican Tories tended to clear off into the countryside and pretend they weren't from Bradford anymore, whereas the liberal manufacturers tended to stick a little bit closer to town. And I suppose that's reflected in the stories of Lister and Salt as well. That's interesting stuff.
Yes, the rivalry between Lister and Salt is very interesting. There's a key part of the tale is to do with patents. Salt and another guy, big industrialist for Bradford, whose name I can't remember, joined together to buy up some of the patents on combing machinery, in order that would deny Lister a monopoly on that machinery. And they then, having bought up these patents, they sold them to Lister with a caveat, and that was that when he produced these new combing machines, he would sell them to the two people who'd got the patents. He would sell them to them at cost. And so the combing machines that were put into Salt's mill were put in at bargain basement prices. I think the figure was effectively £1,000 off each machine. Given what we've said earlier about the amount of money that cost to build the church, etc., etc., £1,000 off one machine, given that they're going to be using tens, if not hundreds of machines in Salt's mill, is quite a lot of money. And it shows, I think, two things. One, the rivalry between those two people. But secondly, it shows how if that's the right word, how intelligent Salt was in business terms. He's often regarded as being a great philanthropist, blah, blah, blah. What is probably less well known is just how clever he was as a capitalist.
Well, he did. The use of alpaca.
Absolutely. Yeah. Next business, please. Anybody else? I think we've done, David. I think we can't get any more. Even Sue is quiet now. Be nice.
Well, it's only because I was in the park today and we were whittering on about local history. But I did read that Lister was sort of a very litigious and hard-headed businessman as well, and you know, not. I mean, when you think about the strike and the birth of the Labour Party, you know, when he starved his workers back to work, basically. But there is Peyton Street running up the side of the mill. And I just wondered, I mean, Dave will probably know, is that to do with the fact that any patent that was coming near anything that Lister could make money out of, he bought up?
I don't know the answer to that one, to be honest. Just touching on the strike, I came across some figures of the number of Bradfordians who emigrated to the US because some Philadelphia mills put advertisements in the papers attracting workers across. I think it was 400 went. And I don't know if that's 400 workers or 400 people, as in a worker and some of his family. But the fact that 400 people left Bradford for Philadelphia during that period is quite astonishing. And I didn't know that until I ran across it in a footnote to somebody's, I can't remember the chap who, one of my other hats I wear is I'm the editor of the Bradford Antiquary, and it was one of the old articles, and I came across it in a footnote and found that I was really, really genuinely astonished.
Yeah, there's an enormous amount of stuff on emigration from Saltaire done by Colin Coast. I think most of it's on the Saltaire Village website, but yeah, I mean, people went all over the world from Saltaire, even though it was so wonderful, but they did. But yeah, okay. Any more for any more? This is final call. Right. Thanks very, very much indeed, David. Do you think we ought to give him a round of applause? Yes. Wonderful.